I was passing by the hallway when I heard my daughter-in-law's voice leaking through the half-closed door, low and sharp like someone slicing paper in the dark. She didn't know I was home early, and she certainly didn't know I paused right there, one hand on the wall, listening as my own son breathed silently on the other side. "She's too old for these end-of-year parties," my daughter-in-law said, her tone coated with that familiar mix of disdain and fake concern. "Your mother doesn't know how to behave around people anymore. It's embarrassing." The words didn't stab, they sank slowly, the way cold water finds its way into your bones. My son didn't respond at first. I imagined him tilting his head, rubbing his temple like he always did when trying not to upset her. He used to defend me with conviction when he was younger, back when he was still himself. But marriage, I've learned, often reshapes a man into a quieter version of what his wife demands. "Maybe she should sit this one out," she pressed. "She doesn't fit in with our guests." Fit in? I nearly laughed. I raised that boy among people with real class, real kindness, real warmth. Now I was too old for a simple dinner at my own son's house. I stepped back slowly, feeling the floor beneath my feet betray me with the faintest creak. Even in that tiny sound, I felt my dignity bending, just a little, not enough to break, but enough for me to swallow it. It wasn't the first time she tried to push me aside, but it was the first time she said it so clearly. Too old, too outdated, too inconvenient. I could have barged in. I could have confronted her. But age, contrary to her beliefs, doesn't make you irrelevant. It makes you strategic. I walked to my room, my step steady, my breathing calm, as though what I heard were nothing more than dust settling after a long day. But inside, something had started to move, slowly, deliberately, like a door unlocking inside me. I sat on the edge of my bed and let the silence swallow everything she had said. Too old. As if aging were a crime. As if the years I carried didn't hold stories, sacrifices, and truths she could never handle. That last part mattered more than she could ever imagine. Because she didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what I planned. And more importantly, she didn't know what was hidden inside one of the wrapped gifts under her own Christmas tree. A gift with her name on it. A gift she was never meant to open. Not yet. Not until the right moment. But fate, I would soon learn, had its own timing. As I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. A strange, heavy calm. The kind that settles right before a storm. If my daughter-in-law thought she could erase me from my own son's life with a single whisper, she clearly had never dealt with an old woman who knew more than she pretended, and who had nothing left to lose. Poor thing, she had no idea what was coming. The next morning, my son called me as if nothing had happened, his voice too cheerful, too practiced, like someone reading a script they didn't write. "Hi, Mom. Just checking in," he said, avoiding the real subject like a child stepping around broken glass. I listened quietly, letting him talk about work, about the weather, about how busy things were at the end of the year. Then, when the small talk ran out of air, there was a pause long enough for the truth to slip through. "About the New Year's Eve and Christmas parties," he started, and my heart tightened, not from fear, but from anticipation. "Yes, dear?" I answered, as gently as I could. I wanted him to feel the weight of his own hesitation. "Well, things might be a little crowded this year," he said, stumbling. "The kids, friends from work, some of her family." I could almost hear my daughter-in-law standing behind him, arms crossed, eyes sharp, waiting to see if he would obey. "We thought maybe it would be better if you spent the holidays somewhere more peaceful. So you can rest." Rest. That was the word they always throw at you when they want you out of the way. Rest. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "Somewhere more peaceful than my own house?" I asked softly. He cleared his throat, already uncomfortable. "It's not like that, Mom. It's just you know how noisy it gets. And you get tired. And—" I cut him off, still calm. "No, I understand," I said. "Your wife thinks I'm too old for end-of-year parties. She's afraid I'll embarrass her." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. "You heard that," he whispered. "I hear many things, my son," I replied. "More than people think." He apologized, of course, over and over. But his apologies were thin, like paper napkins trying to stop a flood. "I'm sorry, Mom. You know how she is. She just wants everything perfect." Perfect. A house decorated like a magazine, with a mother-in-law hidden somewhere offstage, like an unwanted prop. I let him talk, and then I did something that surprised even me. I let him think he had convinced me. "Don't worry, dear," I said gently. "I'll stay at home. I don't want to cause trouble." When the call ended, I sat in my armchair by the window and watched the neighborhood move like nothing had changed. But for me, everything had shifted a few inches to the side. I was not invited to their parties anymore. I was not part of the plan. That's what hurt him the most, even if he didn't say it. Deep down, he still loved me. He just didn't know how to stand between the woman who raised him and the woman he married. That confusion would cost him, sooner or later. That same afternoon, I took out the small, carefully wrapped gift I had prepared weeks ago. It wasn't shiny or extravagant like the ones they like to show off on social media. It was simple, heavy with meaning, and dangerous in the wrong hands. I had originally planned to give it to my son quietly, at the right moment, away from her eyes. But now, knowing what I know, I placed a different tag on it. I wrote my daughter-in-law's name in my neat, old-fashioned handwriting. She would think it was an innocent gesture. She would have no idea. Later, I called my son back and told him I had left a small gift under their tree when they weren't home, just to keep the tradition alive. He seemed relieved that I wasn't angry, that I wasn't demanding my place at the table. He thanked me, promised they would call me on Christmas, and hung up sounding lighter. If only he knew. Traditions are funny things. You can change the decorations, the menu, the guest list, but there's always something that refuses to be erased. This time, that something was wrapped in paper, tied with a ribbon, waiting for the wrong person to open it. 2 days before Christmas, I decided to deliver the gift myself. It was early morning, the kind of quiet where the air feels undecided between cold and warm, and the streets are still waking up. I wore my old gray coat, the one my son used to call my armor, and took a slow walk to their house. I didn't ring the bell. I didn't want a scene. Instead, I used the spare key my son had given me years ago, back when trust still felt natural, not nostalgic. I slipped inside like a ghost, careful, respectful, yet no longer welcome. The house smelled of cinnamon and expensive candles, the kind that burned to show status rather than comfort. Everything was arranged perfectly, as if trying too hard to appear effortless. My daughter-in-law's touch was everywhere: golden ornaments, symmetrical garlands, a tree so tall it nearly reached the ceiling. And beneath it, dozens of gifts wrapped with precision, each one color-coded, tagged, and aligned like soldiers. There was no space for mistakes in her world. How ironic that her biggest one was already waiting for her. I knelt down slowly, my knees complaining more than I did, and placed my small, modest gift among the shiny, luxurious ones. It looked out of place, almost embarrassed to be there, but that was precisely why it worked. In a sea of perfection, imperfection draws attention. I adjusted the ribbon one last time, making sure her name was facing outward. She would notice it. She would be curious. She would assume it was something sentimental. She had no idea that curiosity was about to become her undoing. As I stood up, I took a moment to look around the living room. On the mantel stood family photos I wasn't part of anymore. My son, smiling awkwardly. My grandchildren, posed like catalog children. And my daughter-in-law, in every picture, positioned perfectly, like the centerpiece she believed she was. But what struck me wasn't the absence of me. It was the absence of authenticity. Their smiles didn't look lived in. They looked rehearsed. And suddenly, I felt no sadness about not being invited. I felt relief. I walked toward the kitchen to leave a small note on the counter, pretending I had only come to drop off some cookies. But halfway there, I heard a noise upstairs, a door, faint, but definitely closing. My heart jumped, and instinct told me to be still. For a moment, I wondered if they were home, or if someone had returned unexpectedly. I waited, listening, breathing as quietly as someone with my age could manage. Nothing else moved, no voices followed, and the house fell silent again. Maybe it was just the heating system. Or maybe something else. Either way, I slipped out as silently as I had entered. Back outside, I felt the weight of the cold air on my face, but it didn't bother me. If anything, it sharpened my senses. As I walked home, I replayed everything in my mind: the whisper at the door, the hesitation in my son's voice, the perfect house with imperfect truths hiding beneath its decorations. And the gift. Always the gift. It contained something she should never have seen, never have touched, never have opened. Christmas was 2 days away. She was about to open the wrong present. And when she did, she would learn that calling me too old might have been the last mistake she ever made in this family. The next morning, my phone rang earlier than usual. Not early enough to be alarming, but early enough to feel intentional. When I answered, my daughter-in-law's voice came through unusually sweet, like honey poured over something rotten. "Hi, Mom," she said, stretching the word mom, as if trying it on for the first time. She never called me that. Not sincerely. "We found the cookies you left. Thank you so much." Her tone was bright, too bright, like a light bulb about to burst. I listened without interrupting, letting her perform her forced kindness. She mentioned how thoughtful I was, how delicate my gift wrapping looked, how surprised they were to see a present with her name on it. She emphasized the last part, testing my reaction, waiting for a crack in my voice. I gave her nothing. "Oh, yes," I said gently. "Just a little something." The silence that followed was heavy, like she expected me to explain what was inside. She didn't know that silence can be louder than any confession. Then she asked a question that confirmed my suspicions. "Did you come inside the house yesterday? We weren't expecting anyone." I felt the corner of my mouth lift, just slightly. "Yes, dear," I answered calmly. "I used the spare key. I knocked, but no one came to the door. I thought it was fine." She didn't like that answer. I could hear her exhale through her teeth, controlling herself. "Right. Of course. The spare key." She had forgotten it existed. She had forgotten I still had access to the world she had been trying so desperately to keep me out of. Her voice trembled, just enough for me to catch it. "Next time, just text us first, okay? For safety." Safety. Another word people use to make elders feel like burdens. I played along. "Of course, sweetheart," I said kindly. "It won't happen again." But inside I was smiling. Not out of spite, but because she sounded nervous. Shaken. Like someone who sensed that a door she kept locked had been opened. Her fear wasn't about me entering. Her fear was about what I might have seen. Before hanging up, she added a final, overly casual comment. "We won't be opening gifts until Christmas Eve. I'll save your present for that night." She said it like an announcement. A warning. A challenge. "You do that," I replied softly. "I hope it brings clarity." That last word made her inhale sharply. Then the call ended abruptly. I placed the phone on the table and stared at it for a long moment. Something in her tone didn't fit. She wasn't angry. She was unsettled. Uneasy. As if she had found something in the house that didn't match her perfect little narrative. Something she wasn't ready to confront. A diary? A photograph? A note? Or maybe the gift itself whispered a secret she wasn't meant to know yet. She didn't open it, but she touched it. I could feel it. The rest of the day, my son didn't call. Not a message, not a check-in, not even a forwarded meme like he used to send when he didn't know what to say. That silence told me he had been pulled into something, an argument, a question, perhaps even a discovery. And if she opened the wrong drawer, checked the wrong shelf, or found the wrong envelope while looking for clues, then the real storm hadn't even begun. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the cold settled heavy over the street, I felt something in my chest I hadn't felt in years, a quiet certainty. The kind that tells you the truth is already moving, even before anyone speaks it out loud. I made myself a cup of tea, sat by the window, and watched the lights flicker in my son's house across the way. It was strange how a place could look so warm from the outside, yet hold so much tension within its walls. I could almost sense it. Shadows walking behind closed curtains, voices hushed but sharp, like knives wrapped in cloth. Around 7, I saw my son pacing near the living room window. His silhouette moved back and forth, hands on his hips, shoulders heavy. It wasn't the pacing of a tired man. It was the pacing of someone who had just learned something he didn't know how to process. A secret, maybe, or a truth hidden too long. My daughter-in-law appeared behind him, her posture stiff, her arms crossed tight, as if she were holding herself together.
They were talking, no, arguing.
Their movements told the story even without sound. She pointed toward the Christmas tree. He raised his hands defensively. She shook her head, furious, while he stepped back as if a truth had finally cornered him. I leaned closer to the window, not out of curiosity, but out of recognition. I had seen this posture before, the same gestures, the same fear, the same defensiveness. My husband used to pace like that the night he discovered something he wished he never knew. And my son, well, he inherited more from his father than he realized. The way he touched his forehead, the way he avoided eye contact when things weighed too heavily, those were habits passed through generations. And now, they were repeating themselves inside that house, as if destiny had a strange sense of humor. Suddenly, her voice burst through the stillness. Even from outside, muffled by distance and glass, I heard her shout my name. Your mother. That part reached me clearly. She was blaming me for something she found or read or opened. Her arms flailed toward the tree, toward the shelf, toward the hallway. My son tried to calm her, but she shoved his hand away. Her anger wasn't simple irritation. It was fear masquerading as fury. Fear of losing control. Fear of being exposed. Fear of secrets she never expected to face. I stepped back from the window, not because I was afraid, but because I suddenly remembered something important, the last thing my husband wrote before he passed. Something meant only for our son. Something I had kept hidden in a safe place, wrapped in a soft cloth, waiting for the right moment. It wasn't valuable in money, but it carried a truth that could shatter illusions. A truth my daughter-in-law would never want him to know. And yet, if she had been snooping around the house after my visit, she could have easily found the drawer where I kept things before moving them. She might have stumbled upon something that didn't belong to her eyes. My hands trembled slightly as I placed my teacup down. Not out of fear, but out of anticipation. Because one thing was clear now, she had touched more than just the gift under the tree. She had touched history, my family's history. And once a person opens a door like that, it becomes impossible to pretend it wasn't there. The truth, once seen, becomes a shadow that follows you everywhere. As I stood there, watching the silhouettes move frantically, I whispered to myself, she opened the wrong thing, and now she can't close it anymore. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in a cold, nervous silence. The kind of silence that presses against the walls before a storm. I dressed slowly that morning, even though I wasn't invited anywhere, even though no one expected to see me. Habit is a powerful thing. Mothers, especially elderly ones, learn to prepare for celebrations even when they're excluded from them. But there was something else too, an instinct. A feeling deep in my bones that the night would not go as planned, at least not as their plan intended. All day, I watched their house across the street. Cars arrived, her parents first, then her sister, then two of her friends who dressed like Christmas was a photo shoot. Everyone walked in carrying gifts, wrapped in glossy paper, shimmering ribbons, and unnecessary extravagance. My daughter-in-law greeted each guest with the same polished smile, the same rehearsed warmth. But every so often, her eyes flicked toward the tree, toward my gift, toward the one thing she could not control. I saw the tension hollow her cheeks from across the road. Around 6, I saw my son carrying chairs from the garage, adding seats, rearranging the table, setting everything perfectly, except there was no chair for me. There wasn't even a space where one could fit. My absence wasn't an accident. It was designed. But what they forgot is that exclusion always leaves a trace. It lingers in the air like smoke. And tonight, that smoke was about to choke the room. At 7, my phone buzzed. A message from my son. Merry Christmas Eve, Mom. We'll call you later. That was it. No photo of the kids. No invitation to stop by. Not even a voice message. Just that one line that felt like a polite eviction from the holiday. I didn't reply. I placed the phone face down and took a deep breath. Age teaches you patience, patience and timing. And tonight, the timing wasn't mine. It was theirs. By 8, the festivities had begun. I could see movement through the windows. People raising glasses, lights flashing, music swelling, children running with excitement. My daughter-in-law moved like a hostess in a commercial, perfect and polished. But her smile cracked each time her gaze fell on the tree, and I knew exactly why. The unopened gift sat there like a ticking clock. Every hour she avoided it, the more its presence clawed at her nerves. She wanted to open it. Oh, how she wanted to, but fear kept her hands still. Fear of the unknown. Meanwhile, I stayed seated in my living room, wrapped in a soft blanket, sipping tea. And yet, despite my calm exterior, memories drifted in. Christmases passed. The years when my husband was still alive, when my son was small and decorated the tree with me, when the house wasn't divided by cold looks and polite hostility. I missed those days, but I didn't cling to them. Because life had a strange way of circling back to the truth, even when people tried to bury it under glitter and lies. Just before 9, something unexpected happened. A knock at my door. Soft. Hesitant, almost ashamed. I wasn't expecting anyone, no neighbor, no friend, no family member. When I stood up and opened the door, a cold gust of air swept inside. And standing there, shivering slightly, was someone who should have been at the party across the street. Someone with trembling hands and eyes full of guilt. But the person wasn't my son. It was my daughter-in-law's younger sister. Her first words were barely a whisper. "Can I come in?" It's about the gift." She stepped inside like someone entering a confession booth, eyes down, breath uneven, fingers twisting together as though she were afraid they might give away her secrets before she could speak. I motioned for her to sit, but she hovered near the armchair, unsure whether she deserved the comfort. "I shouldn't be here," she murmured, glancing toward the window as if the whole neighborhood were watching her betrayal. But I didn't know what else to do. I watched her quietly, letting the silence settle. In my age, you learn that people reveal the truth faster when you don't interrupt. Her voice cracked when she finally continued. She wasn't supposed to open it.
She knows that.
She knows. But she couldn't help herself. Her hands trembled. She opened your gift. I didn't move, not a blink, not a breath out of place. Inside, though, a single thought echoed. So the moment has come sooner than expected. And? I asked softly. She swallowed hard. She found the envelope inside. The old one. The one with your husband's handwriting. So that was it. The envelope I had never meant for her. The one containing the only piece of truth my son needed to know. Truth about money, inheritance, promises, and the kind of loyalty that survives even after death. I felt a slow, measured warmth spread through my chest. Not satisfaction, but inevitability. A truth opened without permission always leaves a scar. She panicked. The sister continued, pacing now. She hid the envelope, but your son found out she opened it. He recognized his father's handwriting immediately. I closed my eyes for a second. I could picture it perfectly. My son holding that envelope, tracing the familiar cursive letters, feeling the weight of a message meant for him. What did she do? I asked. The sister let out a shaky breath. She lied, she whispered. She said she found it lying around her house weeks ago. She said maybe you forgot to tell him, because of your age. Her voice hesitated at the last part, ashamed. I didn't flinch. I had heard worse excuses from younger, smaller minds. She continued, her guilt pouring out in waves. But your son didn't believe her. He kept asking why she hid it. Why she opened a gift that wasn't hers. Why she kept something that clearly belonged to him. He asked and asked until she broke down. The sister pressed her hands to her face. They're fighting right now. Really fighting. Because he realized she's been keeping things from him. Not just the envelope. Other things. Things I've known for a while, but didn't know how to say. Her shoulders shook. Not from cold, but from the weight of a truth she had carried far too long. I approached her slowly and placed a hand on her arm. She looked up, her eyes wet. I'm not like her, she whispered. I never wanted to hurt you, but I've seen how she treats you, and I'm tired of pretending she's right. For the first time that night, I felt something stir inside me, not anger, not revenge, but something like understanding. You came here for a reason, I said gently. She nodded.
Yes.
I came to warn you. She's trying to twist the story. She's telling people you planted the envelope to turn him against her. She hesitated, and she said she's coming over here, tonight, to confront you before he does. She took a breath. She's furious and scared, very scared. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tremble. I simply looked toward the door, the shadows stretching long across the wooden floor. Let her come, I said, because the truth had already left its box. And once revealed, it never goes back in. It didn't take long, maybe 5 minutes after her sister finished speaking, before a loud, sharp knock slammed against my door. Not a polite knock. Not a hesitant one. The kind of knock a person delivers when they're not looking for conversation, they're looking for a fight. My daughter-in-law's sister jolted upright, her eyes wide with fear. I simply placed a hand on her arm and whispered, Do not worry. Some storms arrive loud because they are weak inside. Another knock. Harder. Open the door, my daughter-in-law's voice barked from the other side, trembling with anger and humiliation. The kind of trembling that comes when someone realizes they're losing control of a narrative they spent years crafting. I stood up slowly, my bones reminding me of every winter I had lived through, and walked toward the door with the calm dignity only age can grant. When I opened it, she burst inside without waiting for permission. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair slightly out of place, signs she had been crying or yelling, maybe both. Her eyes darted around as though searching for an audience to witness her performance. Where is it? She demanded. Where is the letter?
Give it to me.
Her voice cracked on the last word, revealing more fear than rage. That fear told me everything. She had read enough to know she was in danger of losing something precious, control, influence, maybe even her marriage. I closed the door calmly behind her. Do you mean the envelope you opened without permission? I asked softly. She spun toward me, pointing a shaking finger. You planted it. You're trying to ruin my marriage. You're trying to turn him against me. Each sentence was louder than the last, but the volume didn't bother me. The truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. Only lies do. Her sister stepped forward, her voice small but firm. Stop lying, she said, surprising both of us. You opened a gift that wasn't yours. You hid a letter that wasn't yours. And you're blaming her because you're scared. My daughter-in-law whipped around, eyes wide with betrayal. You stay out of this, she snapped. You always take her side. But her sister didn't back down. I'm not taking sides, she said. I'm just tired of seeing you mistreat people who don't deserve it. I watched them quietly, allowing the truth to unravel between them. My daughter-in-law turned back to me, her voice dropping to a desperate whisper. You have to help me. You have to tell him you made a mistake, that you didn't mean anything by putting that letter in the gift. Her lip trembled. He's furious. And he thinks I've been hiding things from him. Her eyes filled with tears, not from sorrow, but from the terror of losing the illusion she had spent years maintaining. I stepped closer, looking directly into her eyes. I didn't put the letter in your gift by accident, I said calmly. It was meant for my son. It always was. I trusted the universe to choose the moment he would find it. She shook her head violently. No, she whispered. No, he can't know. He can't read that now. Her panic grew, spilling out in frantic breaths. Why? I asked gently. Because, she whispered, if he knows what's inside, he'll leave me. Silence fell, thick, heavy, suffocating. Her sister stared at her, horrified. I remained still, letting the truth echo in the room. My daughter-in-law covered her face with both hands, trembling. The letter had revealed something she never wanted exposed, something she had been hiding from my son for years. And for the first time since this began, I understood. She wasn't fighting me. She was fighting the consequences of her own secrets. She sank into the nearest chair, shoulders trembling, hands still covering her face, as if hiding from the world she had just shattered. Her sister hovered nearby, torn between comforting her and stepping away from the fallout. I watched quietly, giving her the space to crumble. Sometimes people need to break before they can speak the truth. And tonight, the truth was clawing its way out of her whether she liked it or not. When she finally lowered her hands, her eyes were red, wild, and desperate. "You don't understand," she whispered hoarsely. "If he reads that letter, if he realizes what I've been hiding," her voice cracked, "he'll never look at me the same again." I tilted my head slightly. "Then perhaps you shouldn't have given him reasons to question you." She flinched as if struck. "The truth has a sting sharper than any slap." Her sister stepped forward. "What exactly did you hide from him?" she asked, voice steady despite the tension. "What is in that letter that scares you so badly?" My daughter-in-law hesitated, her gaze darting between us, searching for an escape. There was none. The truth had cornered her in my living room. Slowly, painfully, she whispered. "The letter, it's from his father. It explains everything he left behind. The accounts, the investments,
The house.
the savings." She took a deep breath. All of it was meant for him alone. A heavy stillness settled over the room. I felt my heartbeat slow, not with surprise, but with recognition, confirmation of a truth I had safeguarded for years. "That shouldn't frighten you," I said quietly. "Unless," her eyes filled again, and she finally broke. "Unless I kept things from him," she confessed. "Unless I didn't tell him about some of that money when we got married. Unless I diverted part of it to help my parents without asking." Her sister gasped softly. My daughter-in-law kept talking, as if the dam inside her had finally burst. "He trusted me with everything. And at first it was just little things. Small withdrawals. Helping my mother pay a debt. Helping my father fix the car. Then bigger things, rent, furniture, travel. I thought he wouldn't notice. I thought it didn't matter because we were a family." Her voice trembled harder. "But I promised I told him everything. And I didn't." I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the pieces fall into place. All the times she insisted on managing their finances. All the times my son looked confused when bills seemed too high. All the arguments they brushed off as marital stress. All the whispers I overheard but pretended not to. "Age doesn't make you blind. People just assume it does." She wiped her cheeks with trembling fingers. "If he reads that letter, he'll compare the numbers. He'll realize the truth. He'll know I lied. He'll know I used him. He'll leave." She looked up at me, her voice barely audible. "Please, please tell him you didn't mean anything by giving him that letter. Tell him it's old. Tell him it's nothing." I shook my head slowly. "I can't lie for you," I said softly. "Not about something this important. Not when my son's future is at stake." Her breath hitched, and panic rippled through her body. She stood abruptly, almost stumbling. "You want to destroy me," she accused. "You've always hated me." "No," I answered, my voice steady. "If I wanted to destroy you, I would have done it years ago. The truth isn't my weapon, dear. It's your shadow. And it finally caught up to you." Her sister placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You need to tell him yourself," she whispered, "before he learns it from the letter." My daughter-in-law shook her head violently. "He won't listen to me now. He's too angry." Then she pointed at me, trembling. "But he'll listen to you. He always listens to you. Please help me fix this." I took a step closer, meeting her terrified gaze. "I will help both of you," I said.
She blinked, surprised.
"But not by hiding the truth," I continued quietly. "By facing it. Because the letter was only the beginning. The real revelation was still waiting to happen when my son finally came to my door." Not long after she fell silent, a new sound broke through the tension in the room. Footsteps. Heavy, determined, coming up the walkway outside my house. My daughter-in-law froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. Her sister glanced at the door, then back at her, then at me. I felt the shift before it happened, the way a mother always feels the approach of her child, even when he's no longer a child at all. Then came the knock. Not angry, not frantic, just firm. A knock from someone who had run out of lies, out of patience, and out of excuses to ignore the truth staring him in the face. I stepped toward the door, but before I opened it, I looked at my daughter-in-law. Her face had turned pale, her breathing shallow. She whispered, barely audible, "Please, please don't tell him everything. Not yet." But her sister shook her head gently. "It's time," she said. "You've been hiding too much for too long." I placed my hand on the doorknob and spoke softly, more to the truth than to either of them. Whatever happens now needed to happen. When I opened the door, my son stood there with the envelope in his hand. He looked older than he did yesterday, eyes tired, jaw tight, shoulders heavy. He stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, and when his eyes found his wife standing in the corner, her face streaked with tears, something inside him cracked. "So it was true," he said quietly. "You did come here." She rushed toward him, reaching for his arm. "I can explain," she pleaded. But he stepped back, not harshly, not angrily, but with a kind of sorrow that hurt to witness. The kind of sorrow that comes when love meets betrayal. "You should have explained years ago," he murmured. He turned toward me next. "Mom, why didn't you tell me about the letters sooner?" I felt the weight of his question, but I refused to lower my gaze. "Because it wasn't my truth to force on you," I answered gently. "Your father wanted you to have it when you were ready. I trusted life to choose the moment." He exhaled, rubbing the bridge of his nose the way his father used to when overwhelmed. "But she opened it," he said, motioning to his wife. "She went through my things. She hid it from me." His voice wavered. "Why?" His wife stepped forward again, tears running unchecked. "I was scared," she confessed. "I didn't want you to see how much money your father left you. I didn't want you to compare it to what we had left after I helped my parents. I thought you'd blame me. I thought you'd leave." He stared at her, stunned. "So you lied?" She nodded weakly. "Yes. But only because I didn't want to lose you." He shook his head, emotion tightening his throat. "You didn't lose me because of money," he whispered. "You're losing me because you hid the truth." His voice cracked. "And because you tried to make my mother the villain to cover your tracks." She collapsed into a chair, sobbing. Her sister covered her mouth, horrified by how deeply things had spiraled. My son turned to me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in years, vulnerability. "Mom," he whispered, "what do I do?" I stepped closer and placed a gentle hand on his arm, the way I used to when he was a child afraid of thunderstorms. "You do what you've always done, my son," I said softly. "You start with the truth." He blinked, the weight of my words settling into him like a seed ready to grow. "But understand this," I continued, my voice steady. "The truth won't destroy what's real. It will only destroy what's fake." He closed his eyes, taking that in. Behind him, his wife sobbed harder, because deep down, she knew exactly what that meant. My son sank onto the couch, elbows on his knees, hands clasped together as if holding the last pieces of his certainty. His wife watched him like a person watching the edge of a cliff, terrified he might jump, terrified she might be the reason. Her sister stayed near the wall, silent but alert, as though she understood that this moment would change the shape of their family forever. And I sat across from him, calm, patient, allowing the truth to fill the room like slow-burning incense. For a long moment, no one spoke. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too many truths stood between us. Heavy, real, unavoidably alive. My son finally lifted the envelope, running his thumb across his father's handwriting. "I read it, Mom," he whispered. "All of it." His voice trembled, but it wasn't fear. It was the weight of legacy. "Dad left everything to me, and you knew. You knew, and you didn't say a word." "Yes," I said softly, "because he trusted you to find out when you were ready. And I trusted his judgment." My son swallowed hard, absorbing that. But his eyes fell on his wife. She opened it. She hid it. She lied. My daughter-in-law curled into herself, her voice small and broken. I didn't know what else to do. I thought if you saw the money he left, you'd start asking questions, and then you'd see the withdrawals, and then you'd see the truth, her sister said gently. The words fell like a stone in water. My son leaned back, staring at the ceiling, fighting the kind of heartbreak that doesn't come from betrayal itself, but from realizing how long the betrayal lived in silence. I trusted you, he whispered to his wife. All these years. She covered her mouth, sobs shaking through her. I'm sorry, she cried. I'm so sorry. I didn't know how to fix it. I just kept digging deeper. I didn't want to lose you. He looked at her with eyes full of pain. You didn't lose me because of the money. You lost me because every time you had a choice between truth and comfort, you chose comfort. His voice broke. You chose fear. You chose secrecy. And you dragged my mother into it to cover your mistakes. The room went still. She had no defense left. No lies to hide behind. And then, unexpectedly, he turned to me again. Mom, did Dad know? Did he know how things would turn out? I smiled softly, feeling a warmth in my chest. Your father didn't believe in predicting the future, I said. But he believed in preparing for it. The letter wasn't about money.
It was about integrity.
He wanted you to build your life on a foundation stronger than fear, stronger than lies, stronger than inheritance. My son closed his eyes, the truth settling deeper into him. I feel like I don't know my own marriage, he whispered. His wife burst into new tears. You do, I said gently. You know the real parts, the good parts. But now you're discovering the parts she hid, even from herself. His wife looked up at me, surprised by the softness in my tone. I'm not here to destroy your marriage, I continued. I'm here to protect my son. And protecting someone doesn't always mean removing people. It means revealing truths they deserve to face. My daughter-in-law's sobs softened into trembling silence. She wiped her cheeks and whispered, What do I do now? I didn't answer. I turned to my son instead. That's not my question to answer, I said. It's his. He inhaled deeply, courage gathering slowly. I need honesty, he said firmly. No more secrets. No more hidden accounts. No more stories that don't match. He looked at her with tired, aching clarity. If we have any chance of surviving this, everything comes out tonight. She nodded slowly, terrified but accepting. Her sister stepped closer and squeezed her hand. The truth had finally sat at the table. Now it was time to see who would remain seated. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her breath shaky and uneven, as though each inhale cost her a piece of her pride. My son sat still, waiting, not demanding, not forcing, simply waiting. That, more than anything, terrified her. A man who yells can be argued with. A man who waits in silence cannot be controlled. She knew the difference. And tonight, silence was her judge. Her sister pulled a chair closer and gently guided her to sit. Tell the truth, she whispered. All of it. He deserves that. My daughter-in-law gripped the edges of the chair, knuckles white, body trembling. Okay, she murmured, barely audible. Okay, I'll tell everything. She lifted her eyes to my son. Just please remember that I never meant to hurt you. I made mistakes, but I never stopped loving you.
My son didn't respond.
He simply nodded, encouraging her to continue. The words slipped out slowly at first, then gained momentum like a confession that had waited too long to breathe. When we got married, she began, I was overwhelmed. Your mother had everything organized, everything in order, and your father had left you more than anyone expected. I felt small, like I brought nothing to the marriage. She swallowed hard. And then my parents started struggling. My mother lost her job. My father's debts caught up with him. They came to me begging for help. She clenched her hands tighter. I panicked. I didn't want you to think I married you for money. I thought if I told you I needed help for my family, you'd see me differently. Her sister whispered. He wouldn't have. But she continued as if she hadn't heard. So I took a little, just a little. I planned to replace it. I kept records. I kept everything hidden because I wanted to surprise you one day by paying it all back. Her voice cracked. But then things got worse. And worse. And I kept thinking I could fix it before you found out. She finally looked at my son, tears spilling again. But I couldn't. The hole got bigger. My son sat back, stunned. You could have told me, he said, voice thick. I would have helped. We could have helped together. She cried harder. I know that now. But back then, I was ashamed. She paused, trembling. Then the inheritance letter appeared. And I knew if you saw the original numbers, you'd notice the missing money. You'd know I'd lied. Silence fell like snowfall, soft but suffocating. Her sister turned to me, eyes wide with realization. You didn't put the letter in her gift to expose her, she whispered. You were giving your son what already belonged to him. I nodded slowly. Truth finds its way, I said softly. Always. My son held the envelope with trembling fingers, staring at it as if seeing it for the first time. Did you ever plan to tell me? He asked, his voice barely steady. She tried to speak but broke down again. Yes, she choked. But every day I waited, it became harder. And then you started trusting me completely with our finances, and I didn't want to ruin that. I didn't want to ruin us. He looked away, his jaw tightening with quiet heartbreak. You didn't ruin us because you needed help, he whispered. You ruined us because you thought I wasn't strong enough to face the truth with you. Her sobs filled the room, raw, unguarded, human. I leaned forward gently. My dear, I said softly, secrets don't protect love. They poison it. She looked at me through swollen eyes. I know, she whispered. I know now. My son closed his eyes, struggling with the weight of everything revealed tonight. Then he spoke words that changed all three of them. Tonight, we rebuild the truth. Or we end the lie. His wife let out a broken breath. His sister nodded in solemn support. And I sat back, knowing the moment I had waited years for, my son's awakening, had finally arrived. The room felt different after his words, heavier, yet somehow clearer. Like the air right after a thunderstorm when everything is washed clean but the ground is still trembling. My daughter-in-law wiped her cheeks, her eyes swollen and exhausted, but I could see something shifting inside her. Shame was no longer her shield. Honesty was becoming the only path left. Her sister sat beside her, a steady presence, as if silently promising to keep her from collapsing under the weight of her own confession. My son ran a hand through his hair, pacing slowly in front of the fireplace. We're going back home, he said finally. All of us. He looked at his wife. If we're going to rebuild anything, it has to start where the lies began. She nodded weakly, like someone accepting a sentence they knew they deserved. Her sister stood as well, ready to follow. But before anyone moved, my son turned to me. Mom, he said quietly, will you come with us? I want you there. His request caught me by surprise, not because I felt unwelcome, but because it had been so long since he'd asked for my presence with sincerity rather than obligation. I nodded, rising slowly. Of course, I said. This is your homecoming, not mine. But the warmth in his eyes told me he understood. Truth has a way of bringing family back into orbit, no matter how far they drift. We walked toward their house together, the cold night air wrapping around us like a warning and a blessing all at once. Christmas lights blinked across the street, cheerful yet oblivious to the storm that had ripped through this family on a night meant for celebration. When we reached their front door, my daughter-in-law froze. Her breath shuddered, her hand lingering on the doorknob as though the house itself might reject her. I ruined everything, she whispered. Her sister squeezed her arm. Then fix it, she said softly. Tonight. Inside, the house was still warm from the party. Guests had left quickly, too quickly, once the argument had erupted earlier that evening. Half-empty glasses sat on the table. Wrapping paper lay crumpled in corners. The Christmas tree glowed quietly, unaware that the gift resting under its branches had detonated the life they built. My son walked straight to the tree and picked up the torn wrapping and ribbon where she'd hastily reassembled the package earlier. You didn't even bother to tape it properly, he said, his voice sad rather than angry. She approached him slowly, like someone approaching something fragile. I panicked, she whispered. I didn't know how to put it back the way it was. He looked at her long enough for silence to become its own language. Then he placed the damaged wrapping on the table. We can't fix what's broken by pretending it was never torn, he said quietly. We need to repair it with truth. Her knees nearly gave way at his words. She leaned on the chair beside her, taking deep breaths. Her sister guided her to sit. My son lowered himself across from her, the envelope between them like a ghost that had finally been acknowledged. There's more I need to know, he said gently. Not to punish you.
Not to shame you.
But because I can't build a life on guesses and half-stories anymore. She nodded, trembling. Ask me anything, she said. I'll tell you. The home seemed to lean in listening. My son began slowly, asking about the withdrawals, the debts, the lies told in fear, not malice, and as she answered, I watched something remarkable unfold.
Pain, yes. Hurt, yes.
But also something deeper, courage. The kind of courage that doesn't come from being flawless, but from finally letting yourself be seen without disguises. As they spoke, her sister moved quietly around the room, picking up the glasses, clearing the table, restoring a sense of order. Not because anyone asked her to, but because she understood that sometimes helping a family heal starts with small gestures, done gently, without drawing attention. When the conversation paused, my son looked at me again. Mom, he said, why didn't you ever tell me the full truth about Dad's plans? I smiled softly. Because truth matures like fruit, I answered. If you pick it too early, it's bitter. But tonight you were ready. He nodded, absorbing that. His wife finally exhaled. Her sister squeezed her hand. For the first time since the night began, the room felt alive with possibility. Not certainty, not forgiveness, but possibility. And sometimes, that's enough to begin again. The house fell into a quiet hum as the hours passed. No yelling, no accusations, just the heavy, unfiltered truth settling into each corner, like dust finally allowed to rest. My daughter-in-law sat with her hands clasped tightly, eyes red but steady now, as if the storm inside her had finally decided to surrender. My son leaned back in his chair, the envelope resting beside him like a witness. And I watched them both, seeing not the chaos of earlier, but the fragile aftermath of honesty. Her sister pulled a small notebook from her purse, thin, worn, edges frayed. You should show him, she said softly. My daughter-in-law flinched. I can't. But her sister insisted, placing the notebook on the table. This is the ledger, she explained. She kept records. Every dollar she took, every date, every reason. She wrote everything down because she wanted to pay it back one day. My son looked at it, stunned. A ledger, he repeated. You kept track of it all? My daughter-in-law nodded weakly. I didn't want to forget, she murmured. I didn't want it to become a lie that swallowed everything. She pushed the notebook toward him with trembling fingers. But I didn't have the courage to give it to you. He opened it slowly, the pages filled with her handwriting, neat at first, then shakier, then almost desperate near the end. Every entry was there, dates, amounts, notes like Mom needed help, Dad lost his job, I'll replace it soon, I'm scared he'll find out. The rawness of it made the room inhale. My son's expression shifted, anger fading into something more complicated. Not forgiveness.
Not yet.
But something like recognition. The recognition that lies born of fear do not feel the same as lies born of manipulation. Why didn't you show me this? He asked quietly. She covered her face, ashamed. Because I didn't want you to see what I'd done. I wanted to fix it before you had to know. Tears rolled down her cheeks. But every day I waited. The weight grew heavier. I was drowning. Her sister rested a hand on her shoulder. She's been carrying this alone for years, she whispered. Not because she didn't love you, but because she didn't love herself enough to believe you'd stay. My son exhaled deeply, placing the ledger down with careful hands. You should have trusted me, he said. That's what hurts the most. She nodded, sobbing quietly. I know. I leaned forward, speaking softly. Fear makes people do foolish things. But acknowledging the truth? That takes courage. And tonight, she finally found hers. My son looked at me, his eyes questioning. But how do I trust again? How do I move forward? I smiled gently. Trust isn't restored by perfect answers. It's restored by consistent truth. There was a long silence. Then my daughter-in-law spoke again, voice small but steady. There's something else, she whispered. Something in her tone made us all straighten. She reached into her purse with trembling hands and pulled out a folded document, older, creased, and clearly handled too many times. She placed it gently on the table, sliding it toward my son. This is what I hid the most. Her sister gasped softly. You're really showing him? She nodded. I have to. My son opened it slowly. His eyes widened. It wasn't about money. It wasn't about inheritance. It was a medical document, her family's history. One she had hidden because it revealed something she feared he wouldn't accept. A hereditary condition. One with a chance of affecting their children. My son's breath caught in his throat. Her sister closed her eyes in shame. I felt my heart drop, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. This, my daughter-in-law whispered, is why I hid everything. Because the money was never the real secret. It was only the shield she used to hide the truth she feared most. My son stared at the document in stunned silence, his eyes tracing every line as though the truth might shift if he blinked. The room felt suspended. No ticking clock, no rustling movement, only the quiet weight of revelation settling into our bones. My daughter-in-law clasped her hands together, her fingers twisting so tightly they turned pale. I should have told you years ago, she whispered. Before the wedding. Before the kids. Before everything. Her sister exhaled shakily. She always blamed herself, she murmured. She thought she was broken, and that you wouldn't want a future with her if you knew. My daughter-in-law nodded through her tears. My mother has it, and my grandmother had it, and there's a chance, just a chance, that I could pass it on. She swallowed hard. I didn't want that to be the reason you didn't choose me. So I hid it. I hid it under other lies. And then the lies piled up until I couldn't see daylight anymore. My son placed the document on his lap and took a slow breath, one that trembled at the edges. You thought I would leave you because of this? He asked softly. She wiped her eyes, her voice cracking.
Yes.
I thought you'd be scared. I thought you'd see me as a burden. I thought you'd think I stole your chance at a healthy family. Her chest rose and fell quickly, panic returning. And when I got pregnant, I panicked even more. I didn't know how to carry the truth and be a mother at the same time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor. You didn't give me the chance to decide, he said quietly. You took that from me. Not because I'm weak, but because you were afraid. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. It was the kind of truth that silences both sides because it isn't cruel, just painfully accurate. I watched the two of them, feeling the echo of memories from my own marriage. Secrets we keep out of fear become chains, binding us even when we're trying to protect the people we love. Fear is a powerful liar, I said gently. It convinces us that hiding is safer than honesty. But hiding always costs more in the end. Her sister nodded. You didn't trust him to love the real you, she whispered to her. And now you're paying the price of that doubt. My daughter-in-law covered her face again. I know. I ruined everything. But I shook my head quietly.
No.
Telling the truth doesn't ruin everything. It reveals what must be rebuilt. My son looked up, meeting his wife's eyes with something deeper than anger, something like mourning. I'm not upset because of the condition, he said. I'm upset because you believed I would stop loving you because of it. That's what hurts.
His voice softened.
A marriage isn't built on perfect health or perfect finances intended as gifts. It's built on trust. And we lost ours long before that letter appeared. Her sister squeezed her hand, grounding her. My daughter-in-law's voice was barely a whisper. "Can you ever forgive me?" My son didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for the medical document again, reading it with new eyes, calmer now, not panicked. As he traced the words, something inside him shifted. His shoulders softened. His breathing steadied. Pain remained, but fear loosened its grip. Finally, he spoke. "I can forgive you," he said slowly. "But forgiveness isn't the same as forgetfulness or trust. You have to earn that back." She nodded vigorously, tears spilling. "I will," she promised. "I'll do anything." He took her hands gently, for the first time since the night spiraled. "We face this condition together," he said firmly. "We get tested. We talk to doctors. We prepare. But no more secrets. Not one more. If there's something you fear, tell me before it becomes a lie." She sobbed, collapsing into his arms, and for the first time that night, he didn't flinch. I watched them quietly, my heart fuller than I expected. Not because everything was fixed, but because truth had finally become the foundation beneath their feet. Her sister wiped her tears, relief softening her face. And I whispered a silent prayer of gratitude, not to avoid pain, but to guide them through it. Christmas lights outside flickered softly, as if blessing the moment. Because sometimes the most precious gift isn't the one wrapped under the tree, it's the truth unwrapped at last. The house felt different now, still wounded, still trembling, but gentler somehow, as if truth had cracked open the windows and let the stale air finally escape. My son held his wife for a long time, not with blind forgiveness, but with a quiet strength that reminded me of the man I always hoped he would become. Her sobs softened against his shoulder, her body releasing years of fear she had wrapped around herself like armor. And for the first time that night, she didn't look like someone hiding. She looked like someone learning to be real. He pulled back slightly, brushing the hair from her face. "We're going to get through this," he said. "But it has to be honest. Every step." She nodded, trembling. "It will be," she whispered. "I swear it." Her sister exhaled in relief, sinking into a chair as though the tension in her own spine had finally loosened. She had carried her sister's burden longer than anyone knew, and now she, too, was finally putting it down. My son turned to me next. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm sorry you were dragged into this. You deserved to be at our Christmas. You deserved better." I shook my head gently. "I didn't need a seat at the table," I said with a small smile. "I needed a seat in the truth. And tonight I finally have one." He looked down, ashamed. "You heard us calling you old, irrelevant." His jaw tightened. "I hate that you heard that." I stepped closer and placed a hand on his cheek, the same way I did when he was a boy with scraped knees and trembling lips. "Age doesn't make me invisible," I said softly. "It makes me see more than you think." He swallowed hard as my hand slid down to his arm. "And irrelevant?" I added with a gentle chuckle. "Oh, my son, the day I become irrelevant is the day you no longer need truth." My daughter-in-law wiped her face again, fresh tears forming, not from fear this time, but from guilt so deep it softened her voice. "I judged you," she whispered. "I said awful things. I tried to erase you, so I wouldn't have to face myself." She looked up at me, with eyes full of regret. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I needed to say it." I nodded, feeling her sincerity. "I accept your words," I said. "But forgiveness isn't something I give because you asked. It's something I give because I no longer need to carry what you did." She gasped softly, covering her mouth. Her sister whispered, "She means it." And yes, I did. My son reached for her hand again. "We need a plan," he said. "Practical as ever. First thing tomorrow, we get the medical tests. We talk to a specialist. We figure out the risks. Together." His wife nodded vigorously. "Yes. I'll do everything. I'll be transparent. I'll show you every record, every withdrawal, every message. No more hiding." He squeezed her hand, not fully trusting yet, but acknowledging her effort. Then my son looked at me again. "Mom, will you be part of this? The appointments? The planning, the support. His wife looked stunned, but then grateful. Truly grateful. Please, she whispered. I want you with us. If you want to. I smiled slowly, warmth flooding my chest. I will stand with you, I said. Not in front of you. Not behind you. With you. My words softened her expression into something fragile, something new. A beginning. They sat together, leaning into each other with a vulnerability that hadn't existed in their marriage for years. And I realized something powerful. This crisis had not broken them, it had stripped them down to what was real. And real has always been the only foundation worth building on. Her sister stood up quietly. I'll head home, she said. You three need this moment. She turned to me with a small smile. Thank you for being stronger than all this. I nodded. Strength isn't loud, I replied. It's patient. She placed a hand on her sister's shoulder before leaving, whispering, Don't waste this chance. When the door closed behind her, the house felt strangely peaceful, soft lights glowing, faint music still playing from earlier, remnants of a celebration that had collapsed into revelation. My son looked around the room, then back at us. We can fix this, he said quietly. All of it. And for the first time, his wife's smile wasn't forced. It wasn't polished. It wasn't performative. It was real. Christmas Eve had begun with exclusion, but it was ending with something far more powerful: truth, humility, family. The house had settled into a soft, almost sacred quiet, the kind that only appears after a storm has burned itself out. The Christmas tree flickered gently in the corner, its lights reflecting off the ornaments in little golden flashes. My daughter-in-law sat beside my son, her posture no longer defensive, no longer rigid. Instead, she looked human, fragile, stripped of pride and pretense, and somehow more honest than I had ever seen her. My son reached under the table and picked up the gift, the one I had placed there days ago, the one she was never meant to open. The paper was torn, wrinkled, stained slightly from her trembling hands earlier. He held it with a care that almost broke my heart. Mom, he said quietly, why did you choose this moment? Why now? I smiled softly. I didn't choose the moment, dear. Life did. I simply placed the truth where it needed to wait. He nodded slowly, his eyes shining with the kind of understanding that comes only after pain has done its work. He untied the ribbon, not rushing, not fearing what might be inside. His wife watched with hands clasped, breath uneven, as though each passing second peeled away another layer of her old self. When he opened the box, he found not money, not jewelry, not some dramatic revelation. Instead, a small wooden carving. His father's. He blinked, stunned. This is Dad's, he whispered. From his workshop. I nodded. He made it the week before he died. He carved it while thinking of you. He said it represented the 3 pillars he hoped you would one day live by. My son traced the carved lines gently with his thumb, as if touching sunlight. His wife looked confused, then curious. What pillars? She asked softly. I leaned forward. Truth, I said, pointing to the first pillar carved into the wood, a straight, smooth beam with no knots, no flaws. Because truth keeps a family standing, even when everything else is shaking. Then I pointed to the second pillar, carved slightly curved. Courage. Because truth without courage is a seed that never grows. My son exhaled, absorbing each word. And the third, I said, touching the final pillar, a carved beam with gentle imperfections. Grace. Because without grace, without forgiveness, without understanding, truth and courage can destroy more than they repair. My daughter-in-law covered her mouth, tears falling again. But this time they were different. Softer. Cleaner. She whispered. I needed all 3. I failed all 3. I shook my head gently. You didn't fail. You were afraid. Fear makes us choose survival instead of honesty. She stared at the wooden carving, her breath shaking. I want to live by those pillars too, she whispered. If you'll let me. My son took her hand. Not out of obligation, but out of choice. You're not earning your place, he said softly. You're rebuilding it. With me. With Mom. With our family. She nodded, her face crumbling into relief. Thank you, she whispered. Please, thank you. He placed the carving gently on the table between them. Dad always believed truth would find me when I needed it, he said. He was right. He turned to me. And you carried his message all these years. I felt my throat tighten, but I held steady. I carried it because he trusted you, I said. And because I knew the day would come when your heart was ready for it. Her eyes met mine, full of sincerity I had doubted I would ever see from her. I judged you. I mocked you. I tried to keep him away from you because I thought distance would hide my mistakes. She swallowed hard. But you brought him back to the truth instead. I gave her a gentle smile. Because truth always belongs in the family, I said, even when some try to push it out. She nodded, wiping her cheeks. I want to start over, she said quietly. With you. With him. With the truth. If you'll allow it. My son looked at me. I looked at her. And in that moment, I felt something shift inside her, a humility that had never lived there before. I reached out and placed my hand on hers. You opened the wrong gift, I said softly. But maybe that was exactly what needed to happen. Her breath caught in her throat. And for the first time, she smiled through her tears. Christmas had finally made sense. Not in the presents, not in the food, not in the celebration they had tried to exclude me from, but in the gift that truth gave that night. A family rebuilt. A marriage renewed. A legacy honored. The clock neared midnight, and the Christmas lights outside flickered softly, bathing the living room in warm colors that felt almost unreal after the night we had lived through. My son and his wife sat close together now, still fragile, still unsure, but no longer divided by secrets. The envelope rested on the table beside the wooden carving, 2 pieces of truth that had waited years to be revealed. And I sat quietly, watching them rebuild something that had nearly crumbled beyond repair. My daughter-in-law looked at me with an expression I had never seen from her. Respect. Real respect, the kind that comes only after someone has been stripped of everything they used to hide behind. I'm grateful you didn't give up on us, she whispered. Even when I gave you every reason to. I smiled gently. You weren't trying to hurt me, I said. You were trying to survive your own fears. But fear makes poor decisions. Truth makes better ones. Her sister exhaled, relief washing over her face. She needed tonight, she said softly. More than she ever admitted. My daughter-in-law reached for her hand and squeezed it. Thank you for telling me to come here, she whispered. I would have kept drowning. Her sister nodded. I know. That's why I pushed. My son stood up and walked toward the window, looking out at the quiet street. It's strange, he said. I thought tonight would be about celebrating success, family, and comfort. Instead, it became the night we had to face everything. He turned to us with a soft, sad smile. And somehow, that feels more like Christmas than anything we planned. He walked back and took a seat beside his wife. Mom, he said, can I ask you something? I nodded. Of course. He hesitated, as though the question carried the weight of his childhood. Did you ever doubt us? Did you ever think we wouldn't find our way? I leaned forward, letting my voice soften. I never doubted you, I said. Only the lies that grew between you. Lies can choke a marriage, but truth revives it. My daughter-in-law looked down at her hands. I want to make this right, she whispered. Not just with him, but with you. She met my eyes with newfound sincerity. I want you in our lives. I want my children to know their grandmother. I want to do better. And not because I'm afraid, but because I finally understand what family is supposed to feel like. Her words touched something deep inside me, something I hadn't felt in years. I accept that, I said. Not because I need an apology, but because you're offering a future. She nodded, tears streaming again. Thank you, she whispered. My son placed an arm around her shoulders. We'll take this one day at a time, he said. No rushing forgiveness. No pretending nothing happened. Just rebuilding.
Slowly.
Honestly, together. She leaned into him, letting out a breath that sounded like relief and resolve mixed together. The room grew quieter, calmer, as though the house itself finally sighed. Then my son looked at me with a gentle smile. "Mom," he said, "you're staying for Christmas morning. No arguments." His wife nodded eagerly, her eyes warm. "Please," she added softly, "we want you here." I chuckled. "Well," I said, "I suppose I can make space in my schedule." We all laughed, small, soft, but sincere. The kind of laughter that grows in the cracks of healing. As the final minutes of Christmas Eve slipped away, we sat together, not as a divided family, not as rivals, not as strangers navigating resentment, but as people who had chosen truth over pride, forgiveness over fear, connection over silence. I wasn't invited to their Christmas party. I wasn't supposed to be part of their perfect celebration. But I was meant to be here tonight. Not as a guest, but as the heart that reminded them what family is built on. Truth. Courage.
Grace.
Christmas lights glowed softly around us as midnight arrived. And for the first time in years, I felt like their home was mine too.